What is up, everybody? So, as you know, in the United States, the NFL opening season is right around the corner. So, I figured, with that being the case, that I would break down one of my new cues that's been submitted to CBS Sports for the NFL. So, you guys know how we do it. First, we'll take a listen to it, and then we'll talk about it on the flip. All right, let's get it. Okay, so there it is. This particular cue is called "We Built for This." Sort of a double entendre. It could mean we did build for this. And then, of course, it could mean that we're built for this. You know, NFL, we built for this. So if you're using a little slang or whatever. Some of the basics before we kind of dive into the breakdown. 140 beats per minute. It starts in F minor, and then it modulates up to F sharp minor. So let's kind of jump in a little bit, kind of talk about what we have here. So what I'll do is kind of start with what I think is the meat and potatoes. Which is our drums. Now, one thing that you'll notice at the outset is that we don't have a ton of tracks. It's my typical setup, if you will, but not a whole bunch of tracks here. And at the end of the day, you don't need a bunch of tracks. You just need a track that's really hitting and has some good energy to it. Oftentimes, less is more. If I do use more tracks, I do it because I feel I need them. But if I don't, I don't. So just something to bear in mind. So let's kind of start with the drums because I think I would consider this kind of the meat and potatoes of the cue, meat and taters, I guess, if you're from the South or something. But so let's check that. So if we just kind of check out what the drums are doing, let's listen. So one thing I want to point out right off the bat is the Tempany, because I think the Tempany really helps give the cue its nastiness. In this regard, and I kind of really feel like it's the lifeblood of the drums in this particular cue. And you'll notice it's doing a lot of accents, but it's doing a lot of accents actually on the up, ba, not hitting on the downbeats, which I think even probably makes it a little more impactful. And I'm just using the Cineperk Tempany, and again, just pretty, the mix setting, the full mix setting, whatever. I think, let me go to here. So in terms of how we have it EQ'd, I think it's, let's see here. So yeah, we got it high passed at 80. Is pretty much all we're doing there, and that's just to have it not kind of get down in that 60 hertz area and kind of compete like with our other, our bass and our 808 and all that kind of stuff. But it's just Cineperk Tempany. But if we listen to it just by itself, just listen to how just aggressive it is. So there it is. But again, I feel like that's the lifeblood and the nastiness of the cue. Just kind of moving along. I mean, kick. It's just a kick one shot that we just build our kick pattern with. Nothing to it really. Our trap snare, our 808 snare, one shots as well. Right? Our claps are one shot. Okay, so we have that. And then what I do with my hats is I blend two hi-hat loops together. First loop here. And you'll notice that's pan left. And then I have this other percussion loop here. And that's pan right. And if we put those two together, we get a nice spread and some real movement. Just looking for some movement and some pacing with the drums. So, and then kind of spreading it left and right, just to give it a little width. And if we just take a look at the loop, you'll see the only thing I did is speed the loop up to 140 because I do have it warped. And then the second loop, that was almost at 140. You see that particular loop is at 139. But just to not have the one loop, I just mixed the two loops together. And one, like I said, I sped up. Outside of that, I also have a tambourine that we're using. So check that out. And you'll notice what I did with the tambourine is I brought that in on the second half of the opening section just to give it a little more rhythm as we kind of move the cue along. And all I did is EQ'd. I think I high passed it at about 600 and put a little bit of reverb on it and sped it up. And then we have the normal. I've talked to you guys about this before. I like to use the orchestral cymbals, the Piatti crash cymbals. It's just a bigger crash that I happen to like, as opposed to, kind of the smaller, drum cymbals or whatever, or smaller cymbals, especially for sports. I just like aggressive. I like the timpanis. I like the piatti. I like the big sounds for my sports cues. So that's typically what I do. And then, we have a tam tam for accents. Sorry, that comes later. And then we have the tubular bells. And of course, you can't go wrong with tubular bells for sports. So again, if we kind of put all that together, and I'll start a little before the tambourine comes in, so you could just hear how the layers build in the drums. Sorry about that. It's just supposed to be the drums. Here we go. And then one thing you will notice is I do use a smaller cymbal just as some additional accents here and there with the larger cymbal. And you hear that? Later on in the cue, I use that cymbal again by itself, at different spots before I kind of layer in the bigger piatti. So that is really pretty much it for our drums. That is it. It's the lifeblood of the cue. You definitely want them hitting. We've talked about, I think, in the past in terms of how I treat certain elements, with the drums. Let's see here. I'm going to get to what I want to show you here with the kick. My mouse keeps sticking. I don't know why. But with the kick, you'll see that I am using the CLA 2A, and I think I've told you guys before, I really do like that for my kick. So if we look at, how much gain reduction I'm getting with this particular compression. So not much at all, about 2B of gain reduction, but it's really, if you hear bypass, you'll hear the major difference. So let's. Major difference. So yeah, the CLA 2A is great. I love to use it on my kicks. So always typically have no, and then typically outside chain the kick and the bass as well. Okay, so next let's check out the brass. Typically, you see I am not using a lot at all. I'm using the center brass, monster low brass. I'm using Pandora from Project Sam. And then I like to double that with a distorted guitar in terms of my bottom. So if we just check those elements out. So I really like that layer of the distorted guitar with my low brass. I typically do that probably in most of my like orchestral hip hop cues. It's just a sound I like. So, I do it. It's a nice, I think, additional layer just to give your bottom end kind of a little more grit, if you will. So yeah, I typically just use a distorted guitar, and I'm just using the Halion guitar, which I really like. Pull this over here, and it's just, look, it's just a distortion guitar. Is the Halion distortion guitar, and then oops, I'm sorry, I didn't want to open that. What am I trying to get to? This here, and then of course, so you guys see Well, I have it high pass. I have it high pass at 400. And then, so with the guitar, I like to use this CLA as well. And I have the reamplify on, I'm sorry, and the heavy on as well. So just the way that I like to process my guitar. Other than that, in the brass, the only other thing that we have a horn counter melody that comes in on the second half of this particular section. So I'll play that counter, and then later on in the cue, I bring in some trumpets just as another layer. But let me, oh, and this horn counter, I have that doubled with guitar as well, just to help the melody cut through a little more. So there you have it. It's just a nice kind of layer that I like to use. Again, I already showed you what guitar I'm using. It's the same guitar. I use the CLA on it as well. And then the horns, all I'm using is center brass horn short and the center brass horn ensemble. And I like to use the horn short with the ensemble just to give it a little more definition. So you see that's with the short in there. If I play it without the short added, so, okay. Next up, let's take a look at, we'll listen to the trumpets later, but let's kind of just check out the strings in terms of what we have going on there. Typically with the strings, you just want to try to come up with, some type of interesting motif or ostinato, whatever you like to call it. So if we check out the strings, it's a real simple motif that we have going on. So that's the motif for the strings, and you notice oftentimes I like to harmonize my motif. Sometimes, you can just have a simple line. It's just something that I like to do. Pretty much all of it is Cinematic Studio strings on the staccatissimo setting just to give it a little bite, and then I'm also using the Epic strings as well. So the Spitfire short string ostinato, I like to layer that with my strings or with the other strings. In terms of how I have them set, you'll see that, as I said, staccatissimo, I'm mixed. I leave them in their normal positions within the orchestra. So not a whole bunch of, moving around or messing around with the strings there, just kind of letting them do what it is that they do. And I think that motif, works pretty well with it and really bites kind of well. And then the other thing that I have to kind of help us with our pacing and with the bite a little bit is I add these kind of these synth stabs that I'm using from Omnisphere, but this is what they sound like. So again, just gives it a little additional bite, if you will, kind of a little more movement. And as I said, it's Omnisphere. It is the end of the worldliness patch that I'm using, and it's pretty cool. Have it panned, a little more right then left just to give it its own space, within everything that's happening. And so that helps us, kind of gain a little more pace as well. So if we hear that with the strings. So that's what you have there. So that's it for our strings and our synth. And then we have our bottom end, our 808. So my 808 is just a one shot, my main 808 that I'm using. Just a one shot that I'm using. And then you heard kind of on the breakdown, I did some fill stuff. And then for my fill, I'm using the, from Sublab XL, I'm using the Sub Fatty for a lot of my fill stuff. And I actually add some distortion. I'll show you that in a second. So in terms of the 808, the main 808, we have this. So we have that, and then let me get you over to this screen here, and so show you that we do have this side chained with our kick. Okay, so I definitely always like to sidechain my bass and my kick, just try to carve out a little more space. And then if we also play this fill, so if you remember in that breakdown part, you hit it ooh, and then it ooh. So that is this other 808 that I have going on there. And let me show you again, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, that's that 808. And now if I get you back to this screen, I can show you what we're using here. So of course I have it sidechained as well, which is that compressor, but then I also have it just a little distortion on it. Not much, but just a little distortion on it as well. So. So you hear how that distortion just helps it bite through just a little bit more. So yeah, just added a little distortion to it. If we put both of those together in that section. So you see the one 808 gives it just a real big punch, but the other one kind of gives us that movement that we need in that section because that section is, kind of broken down. So in terms of our sounds, believe it or not, guys, that is it. That's all the sounds that we have in this cue. So of course, risers and things of that nature. So I mean, you can find risers and all that stuff anywhere. Some of these are probably, from Splice or something like that. Some of them I use. I can't remember the name of the library. And it's funny, I was just talking to one of my composer friends about the library this morning. But ESM Quantum. I use the Quantum library as well. That has a bunch of risers and things of that nature. Excuse me one sec. Let me wet my whistle. Oh, and yeah, with the season coming up, go Raiders. Yeah, I'm a Raider fan. It is what it is, guys. Okay, so as I said, that is really it. So let's quickly just talk form, just to make sure that we're still understanding what we need to do in terms of form. This form is the typical form for sports. Big open, right? Open with some energy, which we do. And I'll just kind of show you here. So we open with some energy, right? Then about halfway through the section, we add, so you see no stabs here. So we open with energy, but we want to add a little more energy about 4 bars in or halfway through. So that's when I add my stabs, from my synth. That's when I add the tambourine. And that's when I add my horn counter. So that is how, we open, we layer, and then we're at our breakdown. So with that in mind, just listen real quick and identify how this opening section is building and taking us into our breakdown. So you hear, right, those layers, and then when we got to the breakdown, right, so we pull back energy, and I know I say this a lot, but it's so important, but it still has a good bit of energy in the breakdown. You still feel some nastiness in the breakdown, although we pulled back, that look, the string ostinato is gone, right? We kept those stabs in because we still want some type of motion. We pull the distorted guitar layer off just so we can feel a difference, right? And then, of course, our counter, all that stuff is gone. But you see, I still got the Tempany in there because they give us that really give us that punch. So I want you to really pay attention to the Tempany in this section and how I believe the Tempany by themselves really make this section nasty. It keeps the nastiness in the section. So let's just check that. And since we're in this section, so in terms of the breakdown, right, we got a breakdown. Like I said, we keep the energy, but then halfway through, right, we want to add another layer of energy as well, just to kind of keep it, interesting. So what I do is, in terms of adding the other layer of energy, I just bring in my lower strings to add another layer of energy before we go into our second breakdown. So let's just check how now we build this particular section. All right, here we go. So now you'll notice in breakdown 2, we do release a little more energy, right? And we make it a little different so it keeps the cue interesting. So, we got a tubular bells, which I love, for these types of cues. But now you hear how we bring the energy back even more. So, if the guys or ladies are talking or whatever, we got the music on, it's settled under, them talking, gives it room to breathe, but we still feel it, right? We still feel a nice groove underneath it. So now let's listen to breakdown number 2, and now you can hear this is where I did the other sub bass, the 808 bass, but now with the fills and things of that nature. And you notice how I brought even the energy back a little more on my strings, and then I kind of build them in terms of layering up, but the spacing is a little more space in this section for dialogue. And the other thing you'll notice there is I gave them a short edit point. They happen to want to come out. It's a nice, clean, they could come out right there. Or if not, and basically in terms of what I did there, I just added a violin run up, or I should say some string runs up. So we got this going up. So we got those runs up, and then I did a little 808 kind of fall down. So that's what that sounds like together. And then that sets us up to get back into our theme again. So we had our breakdown, right? We had another breakdown, and now we're getting back into our theme. And again, I still want it different. So now the theme is a little more open when we get here. So you'll see here, I just took my bass out. And what else? I took the kick out here. And then I took, some of the more movement in the snares. I took some tambourines out just to open it up a bit, let it breathe a little bit. And then, of course, if you're in Cubase, you have, if you want to mute a track, if you don't know this, it's just Shift M, mute the track. You see how that muted? And then Shift U to unmute a track. So just something, if you didn't know how you can quickly just mute. And you see I also, some Tempany is out there as well. So now let's get into the theme, coming back in here. And boom, now we're into a modulation, and we're into our last section. So we bring all the energy back. We kick it up just a little notch, not too much, because they don't want the energy to shift too much. So we just kick it up there, but that modulation gives us a little lift. And you hear how I utilize I think a riser, right, to get us up into that modulation, and just a Tempany, just taking us into the new key. So I use a Tempany setup just to get us into the new key. So listen to that Tempany right there. see, to continue to build interest, what I do in this last part, so I have a trumpet run. So I introduce a trumpet to you before the trumpets come in. So I do a little run up, and then the trumpets just grab us on the last part of that counter melody, just to give it just another final lift as we work into the button. And then you see also, to keep the even more rhythm going, you see how I have my tambourines kind of riding all the way through. It's the first time I've had them riding through for that long. Earlier on in the cue, I had them come in on the second half, right? Then you don't hear them again. But now, as we're building and going into the home stretch of the cue, all my elements are in. So if you look, everything now is in, right? There's nothing out. Plus, I've added my trumpets here at the end to give us another lift, if you will. So now let's just check out the final introduction of the theme and taking us home to the button. Okay, the other thing that you will hear in this section is button on tonic, a nice strong button on tonic. I think I put everybody on tonic. I might have done fifths. I never add the third on my buttons. I'll do the tonic and the fifth, or I'll just do the tonic. So just for that nice, strong, solid button. And then something I typically do in my final act of my cues is just a little harmonic variation. So I think instead of going to the 2, I might have gone to the 4, or, something like that. So something to think about, just to make it interesting in terms of, how you want to approach it. So this was just a quick, look at, again, how to approach a cue for sports. I hope it was helpful, and I hope that this cue will do well. Typically, like some cues that I've done for NFL have wound up being used for college football, college basketball as well. The same cue that they use on the NFL. So this kind of translates over for you guys as it relates to sports in general. If it'll work for football, or if it'll work for the NFL, it'll work for college football. It'll also work for college basketball. So it's just sports in general. So again, I hope this was helpful to you. Hope you got some inspiration, and more than anything, that you learned something from it. Certainly, if you liked it or if it was helpful, please please subscribe. Definitely helps the channel. We're closing in on 1,000 subs, so that's pretty cool. And as always, I appreciate you guys, taking some time to stop by and check me out. So thanks so much, and God bless.